Some things you can't see, some things you can't explain, and yet you know they're there, watching. That sense, the one that creeps up your spine when you're alone, the one that makes you turn your head, even though nothing's there. You tell yourself it's nothing, but deep down, something doesn't feel right, like you're not as alone as you thought. It's that feeling you get when the house goes quiet, too quiet, when the air shifts, when your own footsteps feel like they echo too long in a hallway that isn't that big, when your reflection lingers in the mirror just a second longer than it should. Sometimes it's a noise, other times it's just silence, but always it's there, unseen, unexplained, unwelcome, not a ghost, not quite a person, not even a shadow you can clearly point to, just presence, aware, focused, intent. There are stories out there, not from thrill seekers or ghost hunters, but from ordinary people, people like you, people who weren't looking for anything strange, people who found themselves in moments they couldn't prepare for and never forgot. Tonight, you'll hear 3 of those stories, real accounts, moments frozen in time, each one an encounter with something or someone watching from the shadows. They didn't ask to be followed. They didn't invite it in, but it found them anyway. It always does. You may think you're safe. You may think nothing like this could ever happen to you, but as you'll see, no one ever thinks they're being watched until it's too late. Lena moved into the apartment on a warm Saturday afternoon. She had found a listing last minute. Something cheap, close enough to campus, but at least flexible enough to fit a student's unpredictable life. The building was older, its bricks faded, and its windows just slightly clouded by time. A little worn down, but still standing, just like she felt some days. She was assigned Apartment A. Only one other unit shared the floor, Apartment B, right across a narrow hallway. When she moved in, she had seen him. A man, maybe in his late 30s or early 40s. He stood in the doorway of Apartment B as she struggled with a box of books. He didn't offer help, didn't nod, didn't smile, just watched her for a few seconds before stepping back inside and shutting his door. She told herself maybe he was just shy or tired. Maybe he worked nights. People live quiet lives sometimes. But still, there was something about the way he stood there, not startled, not curious, just watching, blankly, as if he already knew everything he needed to know about her. Over the first week, Lena settled in. She painted a wall, bought secondhand furniture, strung up lights along the curtain rods. She loved having a space to herself. No roommates, no noise, just quiet, until it wasn't. The first thing she noticed was the groceries. 2 bags had gone missing from her doorstep. At first, she thought maybe she left them in the car or forgot to grab them from the store. But she remembered unpacking the receipt. She remembered seeing the box of cereal and the jar of peanut butter. But they were gone. She chalked it up to moving stress. Everyone misplaces things when they're settling in. Then the faucet started turning on. It happened once, then twice, once in the kitchen, then in the bathroom. She returned from class to find water trickling from the tap. At first, she blamed herself. Then she started taking photos of the knobs before she left. Cold side turned all the way off, hot side twisted tight. Still, she returned to find the water running. She thought maybe the pipes were loose. Maybe it was just an old building doing old building things. Then came the drawers. She began finding them open, not wide, just enough to notice. The cutlery drawer in the kitchen, the top drawer of her dresser. At first, it felt like a prank, except no one else had a key. She started double-checking everything before she left, taking pictures, even placing tape between the drawer and frame to see if it had been disturbed. Each time she came home, something felt different, small things out of place, a fork in the wrong slot, a drawer just slightly ajar. She mentioned it casually to her neighbor once, in the hallway, tried to laugh it off. "Hey, you haven't seen anyone we're around here, have you?" she asked. He didn't answer, just looked at her, then turned his key in his door and went inside. No expression, no interest, No reaction at all. After that, Lena avoided speaking to him. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone in her apartment. She started sleeping with a chair against her bedroom door, kept a flashlight by the bed. She stopped feeling safe. It was almost midnight when she found the hole. She'd been trying to rearrange her closet, moving the mirror mounted on the back wall. It was a tall, narrow glass pane, secure with old brackets screwed into the drywall. She thought maybe a mouse had gotten behind it. She had heard noises, scratching, like something shifting inside the walls. The mirror came off with some effort. One of the screws was rusted. When she finally pulled it away, she saw it, a perfect hole, cut cleanly through the plaster. No insulation, no wires, just a void. She leaned in, thinking maybe it was a crawl space. But on the other side, she saw wallpaper, a corner of a bookshelf, a desk lamp with the light turned off. She saw a room, a real room. It was her neighbor's apartment. She stepped back, pulse hammering, then slowly leaned in again, inch by inch. No glass, no panel, just air. The hole looked directly into apartment B. From her closet, she could see everything. The chair, the desk, the ashtray on the table, even a coffee cup, and something else. A mattress on the floor, no blanket, just a sheet, and folded on the pillow, a t-shirt, hers. She stood there frozen. A long minute passed, maybe two. She backed away, slowly replaced the mirror, and locked the closet door. She didn't sleep that night, but someone somewhere very close by did. Lena didn't speak to anyone for a full day after discovering the hole. She went through the motions, classes, lectures, coffee, but everything felt hollow. Every glance over her shoulder, every creak in the walls, every shift in air felt amplified. Something had changed. The hole in her closet wasn't just strange. It was deliberate, measured, and it led straight into someone else's life, or what she thought was someone else's life. That evening, she searched online. Forums, DIY blogs, tenant rights pages. She didn't want to call the police. Not yet. She had no proof, just a hole and a gut-deep certainty that someone had been watching her. So she decided to get proof. She ordered a cheap webcam, basic motion detection, USB powered. She hid it on the shelf above her doorframe, aimed to capture the hallway, the entry, and the edge of her bedroom. The lens was small, unnoticeable if you weren't looking for it. She didn't expect much, just a little peace of mind. A few days later, she had to leave town. A weekend visit to see her mother, about 2 hours away. She was hesitant to leave the apartment, but she also needed space. She told herself a camera would watch for her. If anything happened, she'd know. When she returned Sunday night, she checked the footage immediately. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for. She scrubbed through the first night. Nothing, just the hum of stillness, her empty apartment. Then she reached Saturday. The timestamp, 2:17 a.m. At first, she almost missed it. A slight change in light, a flicker near the edge of the frame. And then the door opened, the front door, the one she had locked, deadbolt and chain. A man stepped in, not rushed, not hurried. He moved like he belonged there. He didn't turn on any lights. He walked straight across the frame and stopped right in the doorway of her bedroom. He didn't enter. He just stood there, still, motionless, facing her bed, for minutes, long minutes, 7 of them. Then he stepped back, walked out of frame, and the door clicked shut. Lena watched the clip 4 times. Her hands trembled, her breath caught in her throat. She had been gone. The apartment was empty. He hadn't stolen anything, hadn't ransacked drawers. He had only stood there, watching, like it was routine. She called the police. 2 officers arrived within the hour. She showed them the footage. They reviewed it in silence, took her statement, inspected the locks. There were no signs of forced entry, no damage, no tool marks. One of the officers asked if she might have left a key outside, a spare hidden under a mat or a flower pot. She shook her head. She hadn't given a key to anyone. The only other set should have been with the landlord. They said they'd file a report, suggested changing the locks, promised to notify patrol to check the building more frequently. But there was something else. Something Lena couldn't stop thinking about. The man in the video. She recognized his shape, the height, the way he walked. Even without a clear shot of his face, it was him, the man from apartment B. She could feel it, that blank stare from across the hall, the way he never blinked when she said hello. It was the same presence. And yet, when she asked the officers to speak with him, to maybe knock on his door, they exchanged a look. The older officer asked, "Which apartment did you say?" She answered, "B, right across from mine." He pulled out a small notepad and flipped through a page. "That unit's been unoccupied for over a month," he said. Lena felt everything inside her drop. "No, I saw him," she insisted. "I see him almost every day. He lives there. I've seen him enter and leave." The officers were quiet for a moment. The younger one spoke carefully. "We're just going off what the property manager reported. That unit was vacated 5 weeks ago. Locks were changed. No one's been assigned a lease since. They offered to do a welfare check anyway. They knocked, waited, no answer. Eventually, the landlord arrived with a master key. She opened the door. Lena stood behind them. What she saw didn't match what she had imagined. There was nothing inside. No furniture. No mattress. No dishes. No lamp. Just a few dust lines where furniture might have been. A smell of old carpet. Empty walls. No sign of recent living. The police looked back at her. She felt herself step backward. Her voice barely broke a whisper. "There was someone in there, watching me. He lives here. He's been in my apartment." But all they saw was dust and silence. The landlord gave a tired shrug. "Sometimes tenants lie about the move-out date," she said. "Maybe he snuck back in. Squatted for a few nights. I'll change the locks again." The officers nodded. That was their explanation. But Lena knew better. She had seen the cup on the table, the T-shirt on the pillow. She had seen his face. Blank. Still. Watching. She didn't sleep that night either. Not with the lights on. Not with the locks changed. Because someone had been there. Not once. Not twice. But often enough to feel at home. And now he was gone. At least, that's what they said. But every now and then, when she passed a peephole in her door, she still looked. And sometimes she thought she saw a shadow standing across the hall, waiting. The building was old. That was something Lena had known from the start. She noticed the creaky floors, the chipped paint on the stairwell, the old radiators that barely worked in winter. It had a kind of worn charm, the kind renters on a student budget learned to tolerate. But what she didn't know, what none of the brochures or leasing papers mentioned, was how it was built, how strange and dated its design really was, how it held things behind its walls. The day after the police left, Lena didn't sleep. She sat on her couch, staring at the front door. Every creak in the wood felt amplified. She didn't trust the silence anymore. And even after they changed the locks, she felt no safer. It was only 2 days later that maintenance showed up. 2 men in uniforms, a clipboard, a ladder. They weren't there for her exactly. They said there had been complaints about water pressure, possibly a leak. They needed access to the plumbing. She pointed them toward the closet. The same closet that had the mirror. The same closet where she found the hole. One of them stepped inside, looked at the wall, then turned to his co-worker. "This panel doesn't look right," he said. They pulled at it. It gave too easily. Behind it was a crawl space, a narrow, unfinished passage barely wide enough for a person to shimmy through. Dust lined the floor. Cobwebs hung low. But the strangest part wasn't that it existed. It was that someone had been using it. At first, Lena thought they were joking when they called her in. She looked inside and froze. There was a mattress, small foam, stained with time. Beside it, an open backpack, a wrapper, a half-eaten protein bar, bottled water stacked in the corner, and Polaroids, dozens of them, scattered in a plastic storage bin like postcards from a place she had never agreed to visit. The first photo showed her kitchen. The second, her hallway. Then her bedroom, her bed, her mirror, her sleeping, her brushing her teeth, her changing clothes. Most were blurry, angled through cracks or vents. But some were taken from inside the room, not outside the window, not from a hallway, inside. The timestamp on a few showed dates from weeks earlier, before she noticed anything strange, before the mirror, before the noises. He had been there, long before she ever suspected. They called the police again. This time, the officers didn't downplay it. They searched the crawl space thoroughly. It ran behind several units. No one had noticed. No one had heard anything. The narrow tunnel connected to vents to old wall cavities, to places not listed in the building's floor plans anymore. It wasn't designed for someone to live in, but someone had, and he had made it his own. One officer found markings in the drywall, scratches where someone had moved through regularly. There were scuff marks near the edge of Lena's closet. She hadn't seen them. Why would she? Who thinks to check if the walls themselves are hollow? But the strangest part, what kept Lena awake most at night afterward, wasn't just a discovery. It was that the man was gone, vanished. He hadn't been there when they opened the crawl space. No one knew where he went. They searched the entire building. Nothing. No fingerprints matched in the system. No belongings could be traced. The photos were real. But the man, he had disappeared. The landlord filed a formal report. An investigation was opened, but it went cold within a month. There were no leads, no witnesses, no answers. They sealed the crawl space, put up drywall, painted over everything. But Lena never felt at ease again. Even when she moved to a new apartment, even when she changed cities. She kept cameras now, locked every window, checked behind mirrors, inspected vents, because she still didn't know his name. She didn't know how long he had been there, or how he got her key, or why he chose her. But most of all, she didn't know where he went, or if he ever truly left. Some nights, when she wakes in the dark, heart racing, eyes wide, she wonders if he found another building, another crawl space, another girl who thinks she's alone. But she knows better now. Alone doesn't always mean unwatched. Kyle wasn't new to backpacking. He'd done a dozen solo hikes before, including a 3-day stretch in the Rockies, and a week-long loop in Arizona that nearly dehydrated him by the end. This trip, though, was different, not in difficulty, but in silence, in scale. Oregon's forest had a way of swallowing sound, of making you feel like the world outside had shut off completely. It was supposed to be a reset. Just Kyle, his gear, and the trail. No service. No distractions. He had told his roommate not to expect him for at least 5 days. He started at the southern end of the trailhead early on a Monday morning. There were no other cars in the gravel lot. Just one, an older, rusting truck, tucked into the shadow of the trees. Faded blue, caked in mud. The type that looked like it had been sitting there for a while. Kyle noticed the truck, but didn't pay much attention until he saw the man inside. In the driver's seat sat someone in a puffy jacket. Wrinkled face, white beard, just staring. He wore a bright orange hunting cap pulled low over his forehead. No movement, no nod, just unblinking eyes, watching as Kyle adjusted his pack. It made him pause, not because the man looked dangerous, but because he didn't seem to belong. There was no hunting season open. The trail wasn't used much this time of year. And the man's expression, it wasn't blank. It was too focused, like he was studying something. Kyle gave a nod. No response. Just a man, unmoving, behind the windshield. A little unnerved, Kyle headed into the trees. The moment he entered the forest, the air felt heavier. Moss blanketed everything. Pines towered overhead. The trail narrowed into a single dirt path, weaving through dense undergrowth. By midday, Kyle had found his rhythm. The stillness of the forest calmed him. He set up camp near a bend in the river and cooked noodles under the stars. That first night was peaceful. The cold bit a little, but that was expected. It was the second night when things began to shift. Kyle had hiked about 12 miles deeper into the wilderness, away from all signs of civilization. He hadn't seen another soul, not a footprint, not a campsite, nothing. That night, he camped in a flat clearing surrounded by thick tree trunks. He tucked into his sleeping bag after reading by headlamp for a bit, listening to the distant flow of the river. It was maybe 1 or 2 in the morning when he first heard it, crunching, very faint, like twigs breaking underfoot. He sat up listening. It came again, to his left, then nothing. He unzipped the tent and called out, "Hello." Silence. He turned his light in the direction of the sound, but the beam only reached a few trees in. He waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Nothing. Eventually, he zipped the tent closed again and lay back down, though sleep didn't come easy. The next morning, he told himself it must have been an animal. Deer, maybe, a raccoon. But even then, something didn't feel right. It wasn't just the sound. It was how careful it had been, as if it was trying not to be heard. And the strangest part? No tracks. The forest floor was soft enough to register footprints. His own were still visible near the fire pit, but around the edge of the site, nothing, as if the night had erased all proof. He shook it off, focused on the trail ahead, but he couldn't help glancing behind him more than usual. And every time he did, the trees stood quiet, still, watching. Kyle couldn't shake the sound he'd heard the night before. It stayed with him as he packed up camp, ate a rushed breakfast, and stepped back onto the trail. He told himself not to let it mess with his head. He'd done solo hikes before. He knew the forest played tricks on tired minds. But this was different. There was a sharpness to the silence now, a weight in the quiet that hadn't been there on day one. That morning, he made a decision. He had brought his GoPro for trail shots, mostly for editing a trip video afterward. But now it had a new purpose. If something or someone was out there, he wanted to know, just for his peace of mind. He reached his next camp spot just before dusk. This time, a little more cautious. He chose a tighter clearing, thicker trees, less open space. The firewood he collected was more for comfort than cooking. Before settling in for the night, he strapped the GoPro high on a tree about 15 feet from the tent, angled just right to cover the camp and as much of the clearing as possible. He turned it on, checked the red light blinking, then zipped up the night. He didn't sleep much. Nothing loud, no footsteps this time, but a constant sense that the trees were pressing closer, that the shadows between them stretched just a little too far. Every time he thought about drifting off, he imagined someone standing just beyond the mesh of his tent, quiet, breathing, waiting. By morning, he felt drained. The fire was out. His boots were still in place. The tent untouched. Nothing obvious had happened. But as soon as the sun cleared the treetops, he retrieved the GoPro and sat on a log with a protein bar in one hand and the device in the other. The file was nearly 5 hours long. He fast-forwarded through most of it, just trees swaying gently, his tent unmoving in the darkness. Then, around the 3-hour mark, something shifted. He slowed the footage, paused, then played it again. At exactly 3:07 a.m., from the left edge of the frame, a figure entered. There was no mistaking it. A person, tall, thin, wearing a puffy coat and a bright orange cap. The same one Kyle had seen at the trailhead. The man didn't walk hurriedly. He didn't hesitate either. He simply appeared, as if he'd always been there, just waiting for the right moment to step forward. He moved into the clearing, to the edge of the camera's field of view, and then he stopped, and just stood there, facing the tent, not moving, not shifting weight, just standing. Kyle leaned closer to the screen. The man didn't so much as flinch, didn't scratch or sway, or even seem to blink. It was as though he'd frozen in time, perfectly still, barely human in how steady he held himself. The timestamp ticked by. 5 minutes, 10, 30. At 1 hour, Kyle felt his pulse in his ears. The man was still standing. At the 90-minute mark, a small shift, he turned his head just slightly, then slowly stepped backward, never turning around, and disappeared into the trees from the same direction he'd come. That was it. No confrontation. No entry into the tent. No words. Just that same fixed presence, watching. Kyle sat motionless for a long time. The woods around him, the trees that had felt so empty that morning, now felt like a veil. One that anyone could step through at any moment. The man had known exactly where Kyle was. Exactly when to appear. And more chilling than anything else, he had known exactly where to stand to avoid being noticed, except by the camera. And that thought stuck with Kyle more than any other, because it meant the man wasn't wandering. He wasn't lost. He was watching. Kyle didn't waste a moment after watching the footage. The forest had changed in his mind. The quiet that once felt peaceful was now heavy with questions that had no answers. He packed his gear quickly, folding his tent and stuffing his sleeping bag into his pack with an urgency that left no room for hesitation. As he moved along the trail, every sound seemed amplified. The snap of a twig beneath his boots, the rustle of dry leaves in the wind. But no footsteps followed. No figure reappeared. Just the endless stretch of trees and sky. When he finally reached the ranger station, Kyle hoped to find someone who could explain what he'd experienced. The ranger on duty listened quietly as Kyle described a strange man in the orange cap and showed the footage. The ranger's face remained neutral, but then he said something that chilled Kyle more than the night itself. "You were the only one registered for that trail loop the last few days." The words struck hard. The forest, vast and wild, had seemed so full of life, yet no one else was supposed to be there. Just Kyle. Curiosity mixed with unease as he scanned the bulletin board, covered with flyers and posters of people missing in the area over the years. One poster caught his eye. It was old, yellowed at the edges, and bore the face of a man with tired eyes and a weather cap, bright orange, just like the one Kyle had seen. The caption read, "Missing since 1996, last seen on this trail." The date was nearly 3 decades ago. Kyle stared longer, his mind racing. The poster described a man as a seasoned hiker, known for his orange hunting cap that was said to be impossible to miss. That cap, the same cap that had appeared in the dead of night, watching silently from the trees. He wondered how many times a man had roamed those woods before disappearing without a trace. How many times he had waited, standing perfectly still, watching other hikers pass through, unseen and unheard. Kyle felt a shiver that wasn't from the cold. Whether the figure in the footage was the missing man or something else entirely, it was real enough to haunt his thoughts. The image of that silent watcher lingered, following him long after he left the forest behind. In the nights that came, his dreams were invaded by flashes of orange and dark shapes standing at the edge of the trees, waiting and watching. The question that remained unanswered and pressing was this: was Kyle lucky to escape, or was the watcher simply biding his time for the next traveler to enter the woods? And no matter what, the orange cap was a reminder that some paths are never truly empty. Eric and Dana had always dreamed of a quiet life away from the city's noise. When they found the small cottage nestled on the edge of a dense forest, it felt like a perfect escape. The kind of place where mornings would start with birdsong and evenings would end with only the sound of wind through the trees. At first, everything seemed peaceful. The fresh air, the soft creak of wooden floors, the way sunlight filtered through the leaves. It was everything they wanted. But soon, Dana began to feel a presence. It wasn't something she could see or hear clearly, but an unshakable sensation settled over her as night fell. It felt like eyes were watching her, always from just beyond the glass of their bedroom window. She tried to ignore it at first, told herself it was the unfamiliar surroundings or her imagination playing tricks after long days unpacking and settling in. But the feeling only grew stronger. Dana started waking up each night at the exact same time, 3:17 a.m. Each time, she was drenched in sweat, her heart racing as if she'd just run a marathon. There was no reason for the anxiety, no nightmares to explain it, just an overwhelming sense of being watched. When she finally told Eric about it, he was skeptical. He laughed it off his stress and nerves, the kind of things that come with big changes. "It's just a new place settling in," he said, trying to comfort her. But then Dana showed him something that stopped Eric's dismissive attitude cold. Beneath their bedroom window, in the soft of the windowsill, were deep scratches, fresh, jagged, and not something the house's age could explain. They weren't marks from the wind or stray animals. They were deliberate, like someone or something had clawed there repeatedly. Eric ran his fingers over the gouges, feeling the rough splinters and tracing their uneven patterns. There was no way to mistake what had happened. Someone had been right there trying to get in, or at the very least, trying to be seen. The couple started to question everything about their new home. The cottage no longer felt like a refuge. The forest outside, once inviting and full of promise, now seemed dense and unwelcoming. The shadows cast by the trees felt like more than just shade. Each night after that, Dana's anxiety worsened. She became hyper-aware of every sound, every flicker of light on the curtains. Eric stayed awake longer, checking the locks on doors and windows, trying to prove to himself that they were safe. But no amount of locks or bolts could stop the feeling that someone was out there, waiting, watching. And though neither of them could say why, a quiet dread settled in their bones, whispering that whatever was at the window wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. The night after Dana first noticed the deep scratches beneath the bedroom window, a heavy rainstorm moved in, drenching the forest and the small clearing around their cottage. When morning came, the earth was soaked and soft, the kind of wetness that turns a forest floor into a patchwork of mud and puddles. Dana stepped outside to inspect the window again. The rain had washed the dirt clean in some places, but it also revealed something new. There, pressed into the mud just beneath the glass, were footprints, bare footprints, unmistakably human in shape and size. Her heart sank as she knelt to examine them closely. The prints were fresh, the edges still sharp from the recent rain, but the pattern they formed was puzzling. They didn't lead away from the house like most tracks would. Instead, the footprints led out from under the window and disappeared into the woods. But then, without any clear reason, the trail circled back, returning along the same path and ending again right under the window. There was no sign of any other footprints, no prints leading off deeper into the forest or toward the road. It was as if whoever had made them was moving in a confined loop, always staying close to the house, always returning to that exact spot beneath the bedroom window. When Dana showed Eric, he was alarmed but tried to remain calm. Maybe it's just an animal, he suggested. But the prints were too clearly human, too precise, too deliberate. And why would any animal return in such a way? They checked the surrounding area, calling out into the woods, searching for any signs of another person or animal. Nothing. The forest was silent, except for the occasional bird call and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. No footprints other than those strange tracks beneath their window. Eric decided it was time to take action. They couldn't live feeling watched and vulnerable. So he set up a motion-sensitive camera aimed directly at the window, hidden among the bushes, close enough to catch anyone who came near, but discreet enough to avoid detection. The camera was set to record through the night. They went to bed uneasy, neither of them sleeping well, both waiting for the morning to review the footage. When dawn broke, Eric was the first to check the recording. What he saw chilled him to the bone. At precisely 3:17 a.m., the time Dana always woke up in the middle of the night, something appeared outside the window. A man, standing perfectly still, motionless, right where the footprints had been found. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost glowing faintly in the darkness. His eyes were the most unnerving part. Completely black, with no whites or pupils, staring directly into the room as though trying to pierce through the glass and into their lives. He didn't move. He didn't blink. Just stood there, watching, for what felt like hours but was only a few minutes. He remained there, silent and unyielding. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the figure turned and walked away, vanishing into the dark woods along the exact path the footprints had made. Neither Eric nor Dana could explain what they had seen. The footage was clear. There was no trick of the light, no shadow caused by passing cars or wildlife. It was a person, or something that looked like one. But they both felt in their bones that this wasn't a normal visitor. This was something else. Something that came night after night. Something that would not leave. The footprints remained after every rain, always in that same small circle beneath the window. The man with the black eyes was there whenever the camera was pointed at that spot. And with every sighting, Dana's anxiety grew. She started refusing to sleep in the bedroom, instead moving to the living room, hoping to escape the feeling of being watched. But the fear never left her, not even when the man vanished back into the woods. She knew he was waiting. After weeks of sleepless nights and mounting fear, Eric and Dana decided to involve the police. They hoped for answers, anything to explain the strange footprints, the eerie presence, and the man with the black eyes who appeared outside their bedroom window every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. The officers arrived early one morning, trudging into the damp forest behind the cottage. The ground was soft from recent rains, the thick trees casting long shadows even in daylight. It didn't take long for the search to yield a chilling discovery. Tucked beneath a dense thicket of brambles and fallen branches, partially concealed from view, was a makeshift shelter. It looked hastily constructed. Scraps of tarp, old wooden planks, and twisted wire fashioned into a crude hideout barely big enough for one person. Inside, the officers found a collection of objects that sent a shiver through Eric and Dana. A pair of binoculars, carefully cleaned but well-worn, lay on a rough wooden table fashioned from a crate. Nearby, a stack of notebooks, their pages filled with precise handwriting, was arranged neatly. As Dana and Eric flipped through the pages, they saw detailed notes, observations on daily activities, habits, and movements. The handwriting was methodical, almost obsessive. Most unnerving of all were the charcoal sketches pinned to the walls of the shelter, portraits of Dana, faces captured in various expressions: fear, confusion, calm, and sleepless exhaustion. Each drawing was rendered with intense focus, revealing an unsettling attention to detail. One journal entry stood out among the rest, written in hurried, jagged script. "She saw me tonight, at 3:17. She's waking up too soon." The word seemed to confirm what Dana and Eric had feared. The watcher was aware of their growing suspicion. He knew she was waking at the exact time he appeared. Despite the evidence found in the shelter, the police were unable to identify a suspect. No fingerprints, no footprints leading away from the campsite, no clues that could help track down the person responsible for the invasion of their lives. It was as if the watcher had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but his hidden refuge behind. Faced with the unknown threat, Eric and Dana made the difficult decision to leave. Within a week, they packed their belongings and moved far away from the cottage and the woods that had been their home. They sought safety in a new town, hoping distance would bring peace. But for Dana, the fear did not fade. Years later, she still wakes on some nights, the clock glowing 3:17 a.m. in the darkness. The window is shut tight, the curtains drawn against the night. Yet the feeling remains, an unshakable sense that someone is watching, waiting just outside. No matter where she goes or how far she runs, she cannot escape the memory of those black eyes staring in, waiting patiently for the night to come. If you found these stories unsettling, if they made you question what might be watching you right now, then you're not alone. For more chilling tales that reach into the quiet corners of the night, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story that might keep you looking over your shoulder. Remember, when darkness falls and silence grows, the watchers are waiting. Stay alert, stay safe, and until next time, sleep well, if you can.